to organize this kind of session like machine learning and artificial intelligence. Good to see this is getting into staffing association format. We saw a couple of good sessions since morning. One was technology change. Then the second one is how to enable it. So logically, third session which we have is how do we see market changing in next 2 years? And I have great panelists here, and they know the market much more than I know. A little bit introduction about myself. I'm sure you have gone through the leaflet. I started my career from Cognizant as an entry-level trainee. Went into IBM, 14 years in IBM. Somebody says, some of the people say after 10 years, your blood becomes blue. So I am blue-blooded guy, you could say that. Then joined Safe Express as a CIO, so from seller to buyer. It was a good change, right? For some time we did feel how it feels to be like, on the seller side, and I got some of the answers which in IBM I wondered, why is somebody not buying my services, right? Once I became the buyer, I got those answers. And then I joined Collabera as a chief digital officer 1 year back. So, we talked about technology. If you look at Gartner, you might have heard that Gartner said, by 2018, we will lose 1.8 million jobs to the AI. But at the same time, they also said, by 2019, we will add 2.6 million jobs due to AI, correct? So, as an IT professional, I used to get scared every time I used to see hacking news previously, like LinkedIn, Apple, and Cisco itself. Now what happens is, now I get scared when I see in newspaper, technology jobs are going away. Tech professional, be wary of it. While some of it is true, I don't think as a whole, that's again my personal perspective, I don't think that's as a whole it's going to change. Because again, Gartner coming up, Gartner IDC both are saying 20 to 25 billion IoT sensor or IoT devices will be added in the ecosystem. Now, if 25 billion devices are new, who is going to manage it? There will be a job. Whatever automation you do, even if you do 60% automation, there is 40% extra jobs being created, right? Raj mentioned a good point about data. Data existed, but nobody did anything with the data. Now, you need professional to do something with the data, and additional jobs are being created, correct? AI, again coming back to AI, China says, AI is my state policy. Day before yesterday, I don't know how many of you read the newspaper where Putin said, whoever in next few years, whoever is AI leader will lead the world, actually, correct? So with all those things coming up, I would go to the panelists, and as I said, I have distinguished panelists, to know how this will evolve in India. Mainly, I will focus from the India perspective and global, since India is outsourcing hub of the world, it does impact, how does this global view impact India? So I'll start with Dr. Subramani. He is from IBM. Again, me being from IBM, I have seen what is cloud today was Sam Palmisino in 2003 said on demand, and that's cloud today. If you look at, we started, as IBM, we started business analytics and optimization in 2007. Today, everybody talking about analytics. We started Watson. At that time, only few people got Jeopardy game and what happened. Today, we are right in AI conference, right? So I would say IBM as a company has a history of knowing the technology first, even before anybody knows. So to Subramani, Dr. Subramani, how will next 2 years or next 3 years will shape with respect to technology? If you could just say, especially the India perspective, demand and supply.
Okay, thanks for this opportunity. And Anjani, if you say 10 years in IBM makes you blue-blooded, I'm twice as blue-blooded. So I started my career as a graduate hire there. So it's very interesting, particularly when you work for a company like IBM, and some of these technologies they bring in a little ahead of the market. Yeah. But at this point of time, when we see this whole digital transformation, I mean DX economy and all that we say, right? I think it's all coming together because the earlier technologies, in my view, earlier disruptions, if I may use that, were technology induced, technology driven. But now, I think it is more customer driven. And I don't want to go, anywhere else. So I was, taking a cab yesterday. And interestingly, this cab driver has both this Ola and Uber, right? And it was interesting to me. So why do you have these two devices? Are you attached to both of these companies? How does it work? And then he says, I'm from Chennai. So in Chennai, there is this OMR road, as we call it, which is equivalent to the electronic city here, where all these IT companies are there. So he says, if I am getting a trip to drive into OMR road, I use Ola because there are a lot of residents there who may want to go there once in a while and all that. But after that, I don't get any trips from there. It's only these IT guys who are there who make trips. And IT guys use more of Uber than Ola. Okay, this is a cab driver telling, probably he was not even a graduate or whatever, right? So when you say disruption would mean transfer of power from whoever had to some other individual. And this disruption, I think, has literally done that, where the power has literally got into, a cab driver, and Ola and Uber strategists, the CIOs will be thinking, about this cab driver when they decide their whole transformation strategy and all that, right? So I think from that perspective, we have, today is the right setting for this digital transformation, right? But the challenge that we have, I think it's the way we evolved. When I started, it was Y2K. Thanks to Y2K, I had a job in IBM, right? And it was not cutting edge work, definitely. Those of you who started their career, it was cutting and pasting edge, right? So you have to send the 2-digit variable to a subroutine, it will return. I was not even allowed to innovate or put a code or whatever, right? So, and very interesting, some of these, I was doing only on Notepad. I mean, it's sometimes difficult to confess in front of, some of your colleagues, but that's what it was, right? And then as this software evolved, so when we first wrote our programs, be it the 70s or 80s, I pretty much knew it was client heavy, right? So I knew what kind of memory resources my application would need. It was all running on my client and all that. Then slowly it moved towards a browser-based, client server and all of that. And then we started a layered approach to this programming. There is a UI layer, there is a user query, then there is a transaction database and all of that. Then all of a sudden, all these fancy roles started. I'm a Java developer. I don't have anything to do with database. I am a database administrator. I have nothing to do with programming. And over a period of time, we also distanced the application and infrastructure so much that this guy has no clue on what infrastructure it's running, right? But now, it's getting back to the basics. You call it, a full stack developer. You call it DevOps. I need not be an infrastructure guy, but I should have that intelligence to have a meaningful conversation. When you do a shift left, to have a meaningful conversation with my infrastructure guy, right? So be it DevOps or microservices or all of this, so that complacency, if I can use that word, which is a stronger word, that has set in the mindset of the existing workforce, that needs to be shaken up. And Neha, the earlier panel, right, also made the right observation. All these technologies, this blockchain and everything was there for some time, but now it is all coming together and it's firing. And the ecosystem is also there with all your Digital India, Startup India, and all of that, right? So we are pumping in the right ecosystem, right, and the technology is in place, and all of these are driven by client, right? That's where I think the next 2-3 years. When I see it's not going to be your vanilla single-skilled person, as Anand was saying earlier. It's the comb and multi-skilled. So that's where I see the demand going in, and supply is not yet there.
Yeah, thank you. Coming to Paul. So Paul is from Randstad. He is CEO of Randstad. Randstad has been almost synonymous to HR and staffing for years, almost 60 years. And Paul has experiences in, I was talking to Paul, and he has experiences in Korea, Japan, Singapore. These are the right market if you look at robotics automation. Most of them have been done either, most of them are being implemented in Japan and Korea. and this is due to a certain demographic. So this question is to Paul, that how does, and he is very bullish about India himself. So this question is, is there an opportunity for us? And second, Mehul's question, which Mehul has asked to one of the panel members, how does world look at us? Since you have the global experience, probably you would be a better person to answer these two questions.
Thank you. Some great questions. Just to clarify, I have not been in the industry for 60 years, but Randstad has, yeah. We're coming up to our 60th anniversary, which really makes us a pioneer in the industry. I would say even perhaps the very first. Although Recruit in Japan was founded in the same year that we were founded, and so that would make us on par. A couple of good topics in there. I just give you a perspective. First of all, the disclaimer is I am biased. I'm bullish about India. That's why I moved to India from Tokyo after being in Japan for 21 years. So you probably can't find a more extreme change, from if we talk about economy, if we talk about business culture, and if we talk about life. Living in a particular society between India and Japan. If I look at Japan, when I first arrived in 1990, that was the tail end of the bubble economy, which I'm sure many of you know, those were the glory days of Japan, post-World War II. And this was an era of analog. It was about hard work, let's build the country. When I arrived, they were at the middle end of technology. They were starting to embrace technology. Although Japan has overemployment, if you've ever been to Japan, you know when you cross the street, there's always 2 or 3 people there ready to help you cross the street, right? But that's something innate to Japan, which I think we can learn from. They've taken that value on service and applied it to technology. And so what that means is, again, if you're in Japan and you're checking in at the airport and you go to the kiosk, there's 2 people there ready to show you how to use the kiosk. So while they have implemented the finest in technology, there's a piece of touch there that Japan has valued. And I think there's a lesson for us there. One. Yeah? So we can embrace the technology in India, and we are, and we see that, but I think we need to add the touch element. If I take it to service, Japan is renowned for having wonderful service. If you stay at the Okura Hotel or the New Otani, you know what it's like to be spoiled. But I challenge anyone to go and stay at the Leela and Taj and tell me that's not better. And when I compare the service I receive at the Taj or the Leela, it's by far equal or better. Yeah? So here's my next point. The world doesn't know about India. I was in Milan 2 weeks ago for our Global CEO Conference, and I was asked to give a brief presentation. And to my colleagues, the other 30-some-odd CEOs from around the world of Randstad, all of this was brand new to them. Although we work in the same company, they had no idea what was happening in India. So if you ask about the global perspective of India, I would say India has a bit of a PR problem. Okay. And so I've taken it on as a mission to wave the flag a little bit. In fact, I brought a flag with me in my pocket and I pulled it out in Milan. I think there's a lot here, and I think we undersell ourselves. Let me tell you one quick story. I arrived late March this year. The very first newspaper I picked up, the headline that we all dread and we could never imagine: massive downsizing in IT in India. Yeah. Unthinkable, right? Yeah. At least in my lifetime. Absolutely unthinkable. 2 days later, I picked up another newspaper where a government official said, nonsense. So what do you believe? Yeah? I think that's another issue we have in India. There is a bit of a tendency to speculate to the negative. And I will tell you, as a recruiter on the street, because I'm a recruiter, I started on the desk, I continue to meet with clients and be in the game, I can tell you that it's net positive. In spite of what you read in the newspapers, there is a need for people, for agility. To my colleague from Manpower Experience, the need for agility, for trainability, for learnability. Companies are growing here. It's a different skill set, but certainly there is a need, and I'm quite positive about the future.
Thanks, Paul. And I agree with that view. As I said, it also depends on the skill. So while you see some of the traditional companies are cutting down the IT size, or even companies like IBM or Wipro might be cutting down on the traditional IT, but at the same time they have 200 positions open which they are not able to fulfill, either through a staffing or this route. Companies like Automation Anywhere, Blue Path, Blue Prism, UiPath, recruiting, I see tons of recruitment from them directly and through our partner, through their staffing partners who are sitting here. So yeah, I agree with your point. Now, Kapil Sharma, who is from Collabera, And when I was joining Collabera, I did some check that, hey, how is this company? And one of the things, I reached to some of my IBM colleagues, I reached to some of my CIO colleagues, and they said, oh, Collabera is a newer company, but they are a big challenger and very aggressive company. So Collabera being aggressive and challenger company. Kapil, how do you, and you have global experience, you started your career with US and then you were called Globe Trotter in our organization. How do you see India playing a role in this global change, right? So from that perspective, where will India fit in? And if you could take the logical thing from what was discussed in the other panel on the skilling, that would be a good way to get started.
Sure, Anjani. So first of all, good afternoon. Privileged to be a part of the great diverse panel here. And Anjani, I didn't know that you went to IBM to do my background check over there, but thanks IBM. But jokes apart, I think I wanted to just throw a question to the audience. How many of us remember typewriter out here? All of us? Some of us? Millennials possibly don't. I see some millennials out there. They don't. How many of us are really using typewriter today? None of us, right? So what has changed? It is the technology, the transformation. So I think change is actually important. So I think from that standpoint, if you see industrial revolution that has really come, right from the artisan era to the industrial revolution, I think there were some crisis of scale, crisis of rigidity, crisis of complexity that led to some intelligent processes. So from that standpoint, I think I would like to draw this particular conversation more towards how India is equipped and what are we trying to do as an organization, Collabera, what we are trying to do. I think being a sales guy on ground myself, when I talk to most of my clients, I've seen this happening most of the time. They have shifted their demands in the last 2 years. Most of them are talking about this disruptive technologies in the form of IoT, IIoT, or they talk about blue prisms of the world. They talk about RPA. They talk about full stack technologies. They talk about a lot of technologies. But I think are we geared up? I see only a handful of resources available in the marketplace at this point in time. The one who's topping the chart in the pack is US. I think US has the majority of the resources in the disruptive technologies, largely because it is the industries that are transforming themselves which is driving the enabled IT industry. So right from automobile industry or to the manufacturing industry or to the telecom industry, we are seeing this transformation happening. Because of that, I think the IT also needs to transform in terms of what we call digital transformation. So from that standpoint, again, to what Mehul had asked the previous panel and what Manmeet said, I like that. Killing the skill gap is more important. So I think what Collabera as an organization we are trying to do is we've addressed this beautifully. I think a couple of years back, we decided that there is going to be the skill gap which is going to come and it is going to hit largely the entire world and just not India. So from that standpoint, we formed something called as TACT. It's a Technology Academy for Competency Training. So this is an online training program and not just the regular classroom programs, because we see most of these are the professionals who are working who want to really upskill or cross-skill themselves to really be relevant to what they are doing. So from that standpoint, I think over the last 1 year, if you see, we've trained about 60,000 resources on all these disruptive technologies. We've got more than 250 courses, and I think most of our clients that we are talking about are interested in going with that. So I see this to be a very interesting phase. While India is ranked number 5 or number 6 as far as the availability of the talent is concerned, at the same time I look at it as an opportunity because still there are countries like China who are ahead of us from this disruptive technology and the talent pool. I think if all of us in this room and at the larger platform, if the government is willing to really help and invest into us, I think we can really make a difference. What I also see as a trend is that domestic consumption is increasing, right? Right from the government to the industries. I see a lot of push towards digital, right from demonetization, which was the first move to really curb the corruption, but that helped in doing a lot of Paytm kind of digital transformation. So I think the country is really going to transform. I am very bullish. What I see and how I would like to conclude about it, Anjani, is that there will be more demand towards the specialist workforce vis-a-vis the generalist ones.
Yeah, thanks, Kapil. So another point, which taking Kapil's point forward, self-life of technology is decreasing. If you look at mainframe, existed for quite 30 years, went to client server, 15 years probably. Then came the web-based technologies. Mobile came in no time. Then came the whole SMAC portion on top of mobile. Then came AI, and it is making waves in 2-3 years. So the self-life of technology is decreasing. Piyush comes from Arvind Brands, one of the innovative companies. I mean, again, they have been there for almost 70 years. And they are such an innovation. I don't know how many of you saw the newspaper Byte. They have created a Lycra jeans, right? So they do innovation in their own field. Piyush, you have experience of the industry because you have a big industry. So industry 4 evolution, you have visibility to that. You also have changing behavior of the customer because you come from retail background and you do technology for web, you do technology for the retail stores. So how are these technology changes getting into retail domain, both from the manufacturing perspective, from the retail perspective, if you could elaborate on that?
Sure, and I think the other panelists have been quite nice in terms of predicting the future. So let me take the opportunity of the way I see the world. And about 1 month back, there was a CIO debate which I participated in. And I think I did a little bit of research and to look at how things are changing. And believe me, the way we look at the rear view mirror and the way we look front is going to be very different. And I'll kind of talk about 2 macro kind of changes which are happening. The first macro change which is happening is the power of machines. And I think the debate that I participated in, will machines and human beings have the same place in the workforce, in the workplace in the future? How many of you believe that machines and human beings will have the same place in the workplace in the future? Just by the raise of the hands. Okay, still only few people raise their hands, and believe me, that is a reality. And I will tell you why it is a reality. The reality is that the machines of the past were dumb machines. And when I say dumb machines, they were not learning machines. So one of the key differentiators between a machine and a human being was that human beings were able to adapt and learn, right? And I'll give you one simple anecdote. Go and look out, there's a YouTube video in which what people are doing in Japan is, there's a robot which is sitting in a university exam, and there's a human being which is sitting in a university exam. The robot is scoring in the top 1% of Japan. Just believe. The robot is giving the same exam as a human being and giving the same answers and is in the 1%. And they're saying that by 2020, they will be the robot will be the topper in Japan. Now, what does it mean to us? It means, and this is a research which has been done by Institute of Human Development in the US, is that 60% of the jobs which are existing today will not exist beyond 2025. So what will happen is, 3 out of the panelists which are here will not be existing. That's what it means. Yeah. So how does staffing, how does workplace evolve in that kind of a scenario? I'm trying to take a little bit more forward. Maybe 2-3 years, we are still building machines, right? So the jobs around AI, digital, and all those things will remain. But beyond 2025, things will be really different. And I think everybody needs to be well prepared for that. Maybe some of the industries total will be disrupted, right? Retail, for example, the way retail is today, in terms of we have about 1,500 stores, and we are kind of working with professors in the US and doing a lot of kind of brainstorming as to what will change and how do we prepare ourselves. So I think staffing as a concept and industry may take a very, very different shape by 2025. And I think that is where disruptions will come in. People need to be prepared for that. Don't take it lightly, because the machines of today are not the machines of the past. Make sure that you are prepared for that. And the way you interact with your customers and clients, the way you interact with, the way we interact with our customers is going to change. The way you interact with your clients and people who buy services from staffing companies is going to change. And that's a big, maybe a 180-degree shift that is going to happen. And I think I'm no expert in terms of telling what is going to happen, but I'm pretty sure and quite confident that things will not be the same that they are today. So it is a time of innovation. It is a time to take abreast with what is happening in the marketplace, be adaptive, and be ready for that change.
Thanks, Piyush. So, Paul, another thing which is happening is we all talk about machine learning, artificial intelligence, IoT. One thing which has been making inroads a lot is open source, if you look at it. You might have heard Mean Stack, LAMP, all of these are open source, and this has made the inroads quite a few, especially in a startup ecosystem, and even in the bigger organization now it is getting into. A lot of the clients are coming, I only want to get things developed in open source. I was talking to Paul again about this. So Paul, any view where you see this open source getting into a staffing ecosystem, right? And how do you see this future in next 2-3 years, that where will open source demand will go, percentage difference, if you have any number?
Yeah, sure. That's also a very interesting question. Some of the older folks in the room remember Linux?
Yeah.
This thing called open source, do you remember that? How long ago was that? Back to the point you made, it's very interesting. Most futurists, you know how they predict the future? When they talk about the future, the first thing they do is they look to the past. Yeah, because the past tells us about what's coming. And it's very similar. If you go back to the Linux story, what was the reaction when Linux came out? They were considered a renegade. They had a chip on their shoulder because they didn't believe in having to pay for access to information, to technology, for enablement, right? They were kind of the hippies in a way of the IT world, right? Fast forward to today. Open source is all around us. If anything, it's considered the norm now. It's embraced. And we see it at Randstad. If you followed us, you'll know that we've been on a very aggressive acquisition spree, including Monster here in India and also in the US. But we've spent about $1.5 billion on technologies that enable us to do our job better and give better service. And a lot of it is open source based technology. So, I mean, the proof is there that we are embracing it. Now, from the client side, absolutely, they want access to that technology, and we're happy to give it to them and share it with them. I think that's it's a paradigm shift in the way we do our business. It used to be about proprietary technology that we owned, and our clients would pay to access how we would leverage that technology, but those days are gone. We want to knock down that firewall and turn for example, our ATS or our CRM into our clients' ATS and their CRM. And that's already happening around the world. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Some days back, I was moderating a panel on innovation, and the whole startup ecosystem came. A startup versus one of the big services company which was presenting, and there was a huge debate. Don't want to get into that, but KPMG itself says by 2017, India will be the second most startups having country, right? Now, my question to Dr. Subbu is that eating a pie from the established company? And when I am saying there are tons of AI companies today, from Motion.ai to so many AI companies, that's a new fashion, .ai domain, and whether there is a AI or not, but then people try to put it. Is it going to, right now, eating the pie from the established companies? How do you see the future, next 2-3 years?
Okay. So this is a very interesting question on the startups, and my enthusiasm on startup comes by working firsthand with quite a few student entrepreneurs, right? I work with about 50 colleges, and at least there are 4 to 5 successful startups in each of these campuses. The recent one I'll tell you, the Smart India Hackathon was tabled as the biggest hackathon of 2017, right? And today we have the 2018 problem statements out, right? And teams are already working on it. And you should see the enthusiasm that is in the campus. And I was asking them on the skills that they were working, and pretty much these are the skills that I'm not getting people on, by the way. Okay? They are talking about Node.js, React.js, Comundo, all kinds of things which today I hear for the first time, or I struggle to staff, the students are working on, right? And there was this interesting campus. This was in Udaipur. Udaipur is the city of lakes, right? And there is an IBM partnership with the campus, and the students have developed a lake monitoring system. So they have put all their IoT sensors in the lake, real time onto IBM Cloud. There was a lot of Watson analytics running on it. And for the last almost 2 years they have been monitoring this data real time. And then the Prime Minister announces Udaipur is a smart city, and the city, the government floats a tender saying we want to develop a lake monitoring system. 2 crore is the tender value. And the students, okay, they go and present it to the collector and the concerned officials. This is what we have developed. And believe what, the tender is cancelled and it's awarded to the students. This entrepreneur startup, right? They have started one, right? So this is the future where I see where, where the complacency which I was referring to earlier, right? Where, the need of the hour to become multi-skilled is much higher in a startup than in a larger company. And that is where I think they will win thumbs down hands down on this, right? So that, how they develop that skilled ecosystem, the startups. Clearly all your Startup India, Stand Up India rhetoric is quite echoing in the campuses around the country. So I think there is a lot of things to watch out these campuses. And even if you look at these startups from a statistics perspective, we all say, Silicon Valley and US leads, right? And US leads it by a significant margin. There are about 83,000 plus startups in US. But India is a very close second. India and China with 10,000 startups each. And about 50% of these startups in India are tech startups. And if you can't win the competition, you embrace them, right? So what IBM does, okay, we have this global entrepreneurship, mentoring program, the GEP as we call, the global entrepreneurship program where we conduct smart camps. And instead of investing and taking a stake in the company, what we do is we create that ecosystem to provide them the marketing help, getting them access to the VC, getting them legal advice. And quite a few startups have come out successfully in most of these, be it the fintech or e-commerce or education area, right? So that's what is happening, where the bigger companies are realizing that this is where the future is, the future skills are. It's no more the $1 million contracts, right? It's the contract size is getting smaller. We have to be nimble and we have to partner with some of these startups.
So can I just add? So I think in the previous panel, somebody touched upon, and I liked the term, I think you used it, called liquid workforce, right? And that's a very powerful term in itself as to what it means. So structured hiring and structured employment is a thing which may go away in the future, sorry. Yeah. So if structured hiring or structured employment is not there, and we are trying to do experiments in terms of, and what entrepreneurship is all about is trying to throw problems, not to say that, okay, I want Node.js resources. They don't say that. I want to solve this problem. Right. So solving a problem and working on Node.js are two very different skills. Yeah, and that is where the transformation of workforce is happening. So instead of looking at a particular operational skill which is there, to moving to a problem solving, be it design thinking skills or problem solving skills, that will take prominence. And how does the industry as a whole is able to adapt to those kind of skills rather than looking at some core basic skills which are there is going to be a challenge. And for buyers like us, we want to work with companies who bring in that problem solving, and we see hardly any people who come and talk about that. Either people talk at very high level in which they say that I am working on very, very futuristic things, or they work at levels of saying I just provide you Java resources or Node.js resources. So there is a huge gap in between, which I think...
So you think there is an opportunity for people to come in between?
Absolutely.
Okay. Good point. Kapil, another aspect when we are talking about future, right? The discussion would be incomplete without discussion of geopolitical scenarios, be it Brexit, visa issues, protection-based thoughts. Again, you are having global experience. What are your thoughts? How will it impact in next 2 years? And net, it would be positive, negative. How do you see that for India?
Sure. So I think, first of all, I saw Mehul showing me the time, so I need to be cautious about it. Okay. But
I was not looking at
Anjani, you... Thankfully, I don't have my family because you are the one who's saying that I am a global trotter. But believe me, after being married, it's too difficult for you to really have that. But anyways, coming to the context of this protectionism, I think I love Donald Trump. truly. I think my fellow colleague last time when we had the session, Ashwin was the chair. That time, people had this question mark, oh my God, what's going to happen now? It's Donald Trump. I love him because of not of his flamboyance, but because of his business acumen. And I think what he's transformed is we've not seen the New York Stock Exchange or S&P or Dow Jones really going this kind of a level, right? So I think the first thing I would have done possibly if I were a prime minister or president is I would have possibly done the same thing. What he wants to do is protect the overall citizens of the US to ensure that they get the relevant jobs out there. And I think to a larger extent, H1s were the way where we were trying to quote unquote abuse by commoditizing all those skills and taking a cost arbitrage to really still sustain the productivity and whatnot. But I think with this development, there are programs like Hire, Train, and Deploy also being going on in the US, and I think TACT and certain other trainings to upskill the talent is definitely the way to go, and I see a lot of push towards that. Is H1 not going to happen? I don't think so, but it is going to be more specialized. Companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft are going to still require that human Indian brain. So I think H1 is going to continue that way. But what Donald Trump did was a similar trend that other countries are really following, where we are seeing in Singapore, Ministry of Manpower is trying to protect the Singaporeans against the employment passes. So I think this is the trend that we are seeing globally that is disrupting. But then at the same time, I think the domestic consumption, like I said in my earlier conversation, is increasing. So from that standpoint, I think it is, in a way, it is good to have a protected environment. But at the same time, I think there will be more and more demands coming up for the specialized skills, for those disruptive skills that we spoke about. That's my thought.
Thanks. So I think 5 minutes. Start taking questions. Until unless anybody has any more thought or go ahead.
So my name is Siddharth Goyal. I work in a company called Cushman & Bakery, which is actually a real estate consulting company. The reason I'm asking this question is because we work both with all types of service providers, and we keep a track of what's happening in the markets. And one of the things that everyone's been talking about is co-working spaces, right? And what we've seen in India is that especially established companies like IBM, Microsoft, and all have been taking up a large amount of the space. So what I wanted to understand from the panel is that when we're talking about flexible hiring, I mean most people are talking about flexi hiring and recruitment staffing out here. Is this the target clientele, that this flexi staffing that these companies are going to use? Will they sit out of these co-working spaces? Or will it be more of their own operational, the sales staff, the marketing staff who will sit out of these spaces, but they'll be based more? Because it's an interesting trend, because globally, it's more startups which are using co-working spaces. But why is it that established companies are using these spaces here in India?
Anybody wants to take? Dr. Subbu?
So I think that's a big trend which is happening. So how many of you know that Google pays $1 billion to Apple just to make sure that its apps and everything are working in the iOS space, and maybe Google is paying equal amount to Microsoft, and Microsoft is paying to Mutual. So this kind of co-optation will start evolving. Now that is happening at a product company level. Now obviously the services company are still. So I would not be surprised if IBM has a lot of spare capacity. Infosys guys can go and sit in their office and start working on it, right? There's nothing stopping, because I'm just trying to be futuristic. But that is the trend that you will see in the days to come, in which if people have to differentiate based on the outcome and not the technology, I think this is bound to happen. And the ups and downs in the real estate has to be absorbed by either parties. And I think that is a reality. That is why the co-working spaces. So people don't differentiate based on the technology which is there. It is the outcome and the solution which is more important. That is why co-working and co-working spaces are kind of taking up.
Yeah, I have a different view. I don't know. Might be because companies are smaller. But if I look at likes of Flipkart and Amazon, initially they started with a co-working space. Today they want their own campus. So probably
funding.
Once they grow, probably they are like, no, I want my own campus. That trend continues. That's what my take is. Anybody else?
Join me on this question. Maybe, I have a question for the panel. Anybody can voluntarily answer to this?
You want to take this one?
Yeah.
Good.
So, we are all age-old staffing companies doing staffing since years, and we still do a lot of, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, we still do a lot of infrastructure development, infrastructure management, application development, and these kind of staffing, a whole lot. At least I can talk about Collabera. We do a lot of these things. In this new age, it's so scary that you guys are talking about these skills, and we are trying to get there. We all are working towards it. We are bold enough to develop new models. But what really happens to these things that we are doing since so many years, and we still have our projections built on that. I still have a lot of projections built on infrastructure management services. I still have a lot of projections built on application development and so forth, including testing. What happens to these things? What do you guys see? Anybody can answer to this in terms of a message to a staffing company. Will our projections go for a toss? If you can just help us.
So I'll tell you, we are also in a similar dilemma. So Arvind is a 100-year-old group, right? And we manufacture, so 60% of the brands that we own in India are by Arvind. 90% of the denim that we manufacture is from Arvind. So will people stop wearing denim? No. But is denim going to be my differentiator in future? No. So your bread and butter business will continue as it is. It's not, and you only said in the previous question is that your margins are decreasing. So you have to see that secular trend. Will you make a lot of money out of the traditional staffing model? Maybe no. So we are also trying to innovate and then do something different. And that is what I think Gartner talks about bimodal organization, in which you need to have somebody who runs your traditional business, which is where the money will come from. But please, everybody look at investing in something else. Look at the trends which are happening in the industry. Maybe something you start looking at how do you staff the real estate segment. Maybe you must have not thought about it. Yeah. And these are the kind of things that you need to do something which is 180-degree away from what you're doing, and then look at innovation models around that. It may sound crazy, but that is where the opportunity lies. So.
Okay, so coming back to the gentleman from Infosys, what he said, I will need what skills are being demanded by my clients, or what will fulfill, and you need to train. So if you look at traditional infrastructure, 3 years back, we used to have CIO conferences. We used to talk about security concern and all. Today, probably any organization you take, they are already in cloud, and they have a plan to get into 80%, 100%, 60% into cloud. So you will have to change your plan. If I put my CDO hat, I would say you will have to relook at your plan as well, because we have relooked from the buyer organization and that plan. So you will probably make more money, but you will have to relook at the plan and what he said.
So can I safely give message to all my staffing friends, not to fire those recruiters, who are active recruiters or IMS recruiters overnight? Will that business stay for long, or no? It's all.
Retrain them. I would say retrain, but
Well, maybe I'll speak on behalf of some of my colleagues. We talk about our clients and about liquid workforce and how the times are changing so quickly, and how companies are reinventing themselves. But actually, if we look in the mirror as staffing companies, we must reinvent ourselves. And I would say we all are in our own way, right? It's not only adjusting to the client's needs, it's about the future of our industry. And I think back in the day, we put bums in seats, and we received a fee for that. Well, those days are gone. We're more about professional solutioning now. It's not about bums in seats anymore. It's about how do we partner with our clients, and whether we leverage open source, technology, tech, touch, all of that together. It's about how do we move forward and reinvent ourselves as an industry. So, by the way, I would agree, as an old-fashioned tech recruiter, I think the needs will always be there. I get requests daily for people wanting to hire infra managers. So infra goes on Java, not so much, but infra is certainly going to be a need, I think, forever. So, and I would say forever. It may take a different shape, but certainly we all need to reinvent ourselves moving forward.
Thank you. I think I'll wrap up. So what we discussed is net, there will be more jobs in the market. Don't get scared with the seeing in newspaper, right? I do get scared, but and now I am like, no, don't believe them, right? Second one is a startup ecosystem. All the bigger companies, as Dr. Subbu said, you need to watch out for. And two, the staffing companies, probably they also might be a good potential clients. So if whatever pie you are losing from here, you can look at there too. And open source, machine era, these are the reality. You need to look at it, retrain, as Kapil said, like they have in-house thing which they have started, and gentleman from Infosys also in the last panel, he said, the staffing companies which are in re-skilling will win the game. So with that, I would like to conclude, and thanks a lot to all the panelists. Thank you.
I got scared when he said few of us are not going to be there next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anjani, and the distinguished panelists for the enriching discussion. May I request Mr. Yadav, CMD Genius Consultants and East Chapter Chair of Indian Staffing Federation, to kindly felicitate the distinguished panel. We start with Kapil Sharma, Chief Sales Officer, International Business Collabera. Dr. Subramani Ramakrishnan, R&CM Supply Program Lead, IBM. Mr. Paul Dupuis, CEO, Randstad India, Board Member, Indian Staffing Federation. Mr. Piyush Kumar Chowhan, VP and CIO, Arvind Lifestyle Brands. And our respected session chair, Anjani Kumar, Global Chief Digital Officer, Collabera.
Appreciate it.